Welcome everybody to the Hyo Jeong Promise Night. Thank you everybody for coming together and to have this powerful experience with one another. My name is Joshua Holmes. I'm part of the core team that's been putting together the Hyo Jeong Promise, which is, it's a promise. It's a promise, but it's also more than just that. It's a promise that leads to something that you embody. And in that embodiment, you find fulfillment. And in that fulfillment, you find yourself in love. And in that love, you find yourself creating meaning and powerful impact in your life in all areas that you were called to bring impact. And so tonight, what we want to invite you into is this experience with the Hyo Jeong Promise. And we're really proud of this. We're really excited about what we want to bring to the table for all of you. And we know that many of you are coming from all different places, all different backgrounds, different places in your experience with some of this content. Some of you are veterans in this content, have taught this content, so you might be making some mental notes of places that I can improve even, or some of you are brand new to this content and it's something that you are just discovering for the first time in your life. Wherever you are at, when we make this promise and we understand it and we recommit, or we make our first commitment, we step into a whole new realm of who we were meant to be from the very beginning. Our total selves, our best selves. And we bring that into everything that we do. And so that's what we're inviting you into, a spiritually fulfilling and exciting time tonight. So thank you everybody for taking this hour and making it the best thing possible. So I want to honor that time. And we have an hour with each other tonight. I'm going to honor it by making the most out of every minute that we have together. And at the same time, though, if this is what we offer, but at the same time, I know we're on Zoom and we're in this whole new world. Usually we'd be doing this on a stage or at a concert or something, but it can be very distracting because we're on Zoom. You get notifications and you get texts and things. And what I ask and what I encourage is if we could just take this hour to focus and to get connected with each other. And in that focus, I promise you, you can walk away with something powerful. So thank you, everybody. That's all I hope. So let's jump into it. Let's jump into it. I want to invite you guys at any point, if you agree with something or you want to vocalize something, you can just unmute and just say yes, or you can text in the chat, yes, whatever you feel comfortable, or just whatever you want to comment. Everything is open, and I just want to create an environment where give and take is possible. So let's do it. Let's do it. That's all the intros. That's what we're going for. So what I want to start with is our outcome. Our outcome for tonight is twofold, and I want to share my screen here to share that with you. So our first outcome is simple. We want to invite you to make the promise. The invitation to make the promise through first understanding the content of that promise. The second thing we invite you into is an embodiment and accomplishment of that promise. So it's one thing, we receive it, we vocalize it, and then the next step is to take responsibility to embody it in your life by seeking further education or seeking to practice it in your daily lifestyle. And then the second thing is you bring that to other people, you share it with other people. So that's what I want to bring you into today. And so when we talk about Hyo Jeong Promise, we start with this symbol. And that's that if we want to talk about the principles, we need to know what Hyo Jeong is. And it's Hyo Jeong. This is what the Chinese characters stand for. What it means is Jeong is heart, and Hyo is filial piety. So what we're talking about is a heart of filial piety, or in other words, loyalty towards one's parents out of love. And so for many Westerners, this may seem like a foreign concept, a foreign idea. And I thought so too. So in my paper in college, I remember writing about filial piety. And I wrote in there, filial piety, and I put in parentheses the definition, because I thought my professor wouldn't know the word. I don't know, I don't know if that's just me, but I thought that's what she needed to hear. And I got back she marked that down on my essay because she felt like I was disrespecting her for not knowing what filial piety was. So it's actually something we know in the Western world. And I want to introduce that to you. For example, if any of you received love from your parents or someone in a parental position to you in your life? Have any of you received and experienced parental love in your life? Then, yeah, that's the first step. Then secondly, did you feel grateful for that? Yeah, you felt grateful for that. Ideally, some people stop there, they just receive love and that's it, right? But usually we feel grateful. And then ideally, in response to that gratitude, it's a natural response. we want to give back. And so some of you have experienced that too. Therefore, you've experienced the heart of Hyo Jeong, a heart of filial piety. That you received love in your life and you responded to that gratitude by wanting to give back. But here's what's the difference. Is that Hyo Jeong is not that you just gave something back. And I know my mom, she loves to diet, or she doesn't like chocolate too much, right? Especially like dark chocolate. So if she gave me love, then I returned to her this chocolate, but I buy her dark chocolate, which she doesn't like. And she's like, what the heck, why'd you buy me that? Right? Hyo Jeong is instead that I ask myself the question of, what do my parents want? What do they need? I receive their love. What can I give back? How can I return that love back to them so that they feel loved? That's the heart of Hyo Jeong. And that's what we're diving into today. It's a natural response. It's a natural response. So when we talk about Hyo Jeong in terms of what we're talking about, we're specifically engaging with a parental figure that we call God, our heavenly parent. And so this might be a big surprise for some of you, or maybe new for many of you. But when it comes to the Hyo Jeong principles, we're speaking about us as a child in our relationship with God. And so that might be odd for some of you, but what I want to invite you into is kind of this hypothesis. You may not believe in God. It may be something that's distant from you, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay. But I want to hypothesize in this hour, or in this period that you start to practice Hyo Jeong principles, this idea, or hypothesize that maybe God does exist. And from that basis, that maybe God does exist, you take these principles which derive from God, we take these principles and we practice these principles. And if these principles then amount and we analyze that it changes our life, and then we make the conclusion that it's bettered our life, then maybe we can go back and readjust our thinking that maybe actually God does exist. It's kind of this scientific method. But then the other side of it is believing that God is a parent himself. And I wanted to share my screen again to read some words from Father Moon, who is the great visionary of the Hyo Jeong promise. And he's the one who has this vision for really a community of young adults and youth like ourselves who really practice this heart of Hyo Jeong, giving back love to God. And this is what he says about God and God's nature. In the Bible, Genesis 1:27 states, God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Therefore, we can deduce that male and female exist within God. God is the one subject partner who manifests these two beings as one. Adam and Eve are the ones who were to resemble his dual characteristics. God exists as the subject partner with dual characteristics. He manifested his internal masculinity to become substantially visible through Adam as his counterpart, and he manifested his internal femininity substantially through Eve. In other words, human beings represent the investment and substantial embodiment of all that is within God's internal nature. He also says, God is incorporeal and has no visible form. In order to manifest himself, he needs to assume a form. That is why in order to govern humankind and all things that have form, God needs to manifest himself in the form of Adam and Eve. Eve and God were to have been in one in flesh, and God was to be the mind of Adam and Eve. Had God and Adam become one, and had God and Eve become one, then once Adam and Eve became husband and wife, their marriage would have been one with God internally and externally. When by loving each other, Adam and Eve gave birth to those two children, those children would have been connected to God's direct lineage. Love would have bound them together. The reason God created the world is because he wanted to experience such love. God created in order to love. So we can conclude from what he's saying is that because we are made in God's image, male and female we were created, that God is therefore masculine and feminine. And maybe you've heard that God is a father, but what we're introducing is that God is not just a father, but he's also a mother. She's also a mother. And in their relation, in their unity, God is a parent. And not just that, a parent assumes that there must be a child. You cannot be a parent unless you have a child. And so then we find that all things were created with the purpose of love, with the intention of loving us. And that then God created us with purpose so that we could experience that love and that we can return that love. And if God intended for love to be at the core of all these things that he created, then we would have a world that is streaming and flowing and totally immersed and this love about caring and loving other people. And so if we look around the world, of course we see that. We see all this love everywhere, right? I don't think so. We actually don't see that. What we see is the exact opposite. And I want you to consider this. We know viral videos, right? And so we see like a video of an act of kindness, and it goes viral, and which is really exciting and interesting to see, and it moves our heart. But it's kind of sad to consider that something like that is rare and therefore becomes viral because of an act of kindness is something that doesn't happen often. That's the kind of world that we live in. And so this world that God has intended is that a world where love is practiced, it's shared, it's felt, and that's what we call the kingdom of heaven, a world of love, a kingdom of heaven on earth. And this kind of world would bring God the greatest joy. If God created with the intention of love, then the fullness of that love would be a world of love, and that would bring him joy, which love brings us. And so this is where the Hyo Jeong promise and the Hyo Jeong principles come in. That we are the ones that need to strive for the realization of that whole purpose, of that world of love. And it starts with our individual development, And so the Hyo Jeong principles are a blueprint for that development, a blueprint for us to fulfill this individual purpose for the sake of the whole. For the sake of the whole, because we've received this love, God gave that love first, and we are responding to it. It's a natural response to want to fulfill this blueprint in our life. And so this kind of is a journey. It's a Hyo Jeong journey that we go on. And people have been called throughout history on this journey. We've had people who followed their conscience and went above and beyond and above themselves to love others. And that was something that so many people went on. And so now we are called at that time to go on this journey ourselves in this development course. So what I want you guys to do is take a moment to reflect on this question as somehow puts it up on the screen. It's, what does God, being a heavenly parent, if God is your heavenly parent, how does that shift your outlook on yourself, your relationships, and the world? And what I invite you to do is to write your answer into the chat right now after you take a moment to reflect on that. We'll take 3 minutes for that. Thank you guys. I'm loving these responses in the chat. I hope you guys can take a moment to read through them. There was one from Ryusei Taguchi who said, if God is real, then I have a reason to not give up. I don't know if that was exactly it, but I think that's incredibly beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. So I want to jump into it. I want to jump into our first principle now. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen again. And our first principle is very simple. It's a living, thriving, personal relationship with God, our heavenly parent. A living, thriving, personal relationship with God, our heavenly parent. But first, in order to understand where these principles come from, I want to share about where they derive from. And they actually derive from biblical passage. And I want to read from the divine principle, which illuminates on this a little bit more. It is recorded in the Bible that after God completed each day of creation, he saw that it was good. He saw that it was good. This suggests that God wanted his creations to be object partners in body and goodness, that he might take delight in them. How can the creation give God the greatest joy? God created human beings as the final step in creating the universe. He created them in his image, in the likeness of his internal nature and external form, and gave them sensibility to all feelings and emotions, because it was his intention to share joy with them. After their creation, God blessed Adam and Eve, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. Subdue the earth and fill the earth, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Genesis 1:28. So we see here that these are the three great blessings: to be fruitful, mature, and ready to bear fruit, multiply, and have dominion over creation. Had Adam and Eve obeyed this divine mandate and built the kingdom of heaven, there is no doubt that God would have felt the greatest joy as his sons and daughters rejoiced in the world of his ideal. So these are the three great blessings. Many of you guys know this. It's to be fruitful, to multiply, and have dominion. And the first one is to be fruitful. The first is to be fruitful. The first one is actually the most important one because it's the foundation. It's the foundational blueprint upon which all of them stand upon. And so to be fruitful, we're gonna read again. And if you want to read out loud to yourself during this time, and if it helps, you can do that too. The first one is to be fruitful. And what this means is the key to God's first blessing is the perfection of individual character. An individual's mind and body are discrete projections and object partners of God's dual characteristics. In order for an individual to perfect his character, he must form a four-position foundation within himself, whereby his mind and body become one through give and take action with God as their center. Such individuals become the temples of God, achieve complete oneness with him, and acquire a divine nature. They experience the heart of God as if it were their own, hence they understand his will and live fully attuned to it. And so the imagery here is like a tree. And so a tree develops, it starts from a sprout and then develops and develops and develops. And at the conclusion of its development, it produces a fruit. And that fruit is there, it's juicy, it's ripe, and it can be eaten. And in Matthew, so therefore, what kind of fruit does God want us to become? How do we become fruitful? In Matthew 5:48, Jesus describes this and he says that you must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, which is this lofty goal that the fruit that we need to become is perfect. But perfection is a journey. So we're all on this journey of perfection as it is. So in other words, we need to resemble God. We need to resemble God's characteristics. And God's greatest characteristic is that he loves. He deeply, deeply, deeply loves. He's not so concerned about his own issues, but he's concerned about everybody else. And so how do we get to that lofty goal of resembling God? It starts with knowing and building a relationship with the thing that we are meant to resemble. We need to build a relationship with God, a living, thriving relationship. And this starts with our mind. It starts with our heart. Those are our spiritual characteristics. And it's because of those characteristics that we can connect to God, because God is spiritual. And so when our heart opens up and becomes in tune with God's heart and God's love, then we start to resemble God. But the issue is that there's a lot of gunk in between our true nature and God's love and God's heart. There's a lot that's there. So the only way is that we first need to invite God in. And in inviting God in, the only way that God can settle in our mind and in our heart is if we abolish and abandon all of the gunk, all of the things that cause us to live what people would say an evil lifestyle. What we call this is just our selfish characteristics. I want to give an imagery again. Imagine if we as human beings were completely driven by our bodily desires. Just totally driven by our bodily desires. We just slept whenever we wanted. We stole food because we were hungry. We had no care for other people's property. If I wanted to slap Shogo on the face, I would just slap him on the face, right? Like I would do whatever I would need to do, right? Just to make myself happy, follow my bodily desires. Wherever my emotions take me, I would go there, right? But our heart says something totally different. Our heart cares about other people. And we know this. We know that in our conscience, we see this. Our conscience cares and is pained by regret when we do something bad for others. And so if we shifted our mind and we shifted our heart to be the central point and we remove all this skunk, it allows for an opportunity for us to start resembling God. But the reality is that we live in a world, sorry, Shogo. We live in a world that, honestly speaking, drowns us in the material. It drowns us in the bodily desires. It drowns us in selfishness. It asks us to pursue a life where we care about the car. We care about only having the attractive girl or guy. We care about the likes that we get, or we care about how we feel. When we sing a song, we don't think about how this brings happiness to other people, but we think about how beautiful our voice is. Right? When we have a skill, we think about how it brings us value rather than how it can bring joy to others. We live in a world that is just engrossed in this. And so what we find is that we go into our relationships and even our marriages with an intention of wanting to get something from your partner. And then later down the life, we reach a midlife crisis and we stop loving this person for their looks and for their personality. And we start to realize that we didn't love them, and then we divorce and we end up in crisis. And therefore what we get is an entire world that's driven on this selfish desire. But what would happen, and a good example would be Paul Getty, who was one of the richest men in the world. He had all the millions in the world, and he said this: I would gladly give all my millions for just one lasting marital success. He had 5 wives, none of them worked out. So we find that we actually want something more. We want to live with our heart at the center, united with the love of God. And if we center on this, then we start to do this continuously. We center our heart and we start to grow our hearts, and we start to reach out and invite God in prayer, and we continue to grow and continue to grow and continue to develop, and we start to ripen our fruit. We start to develop our tree. We start to overcome our bodily desires and start focusing on serving other people. We continue to grow. We grow again. We pray more and we get closer to God. And all of this culminates into a beautiful, beautiful fruit that is produced at the end that we get to offer to somebody. And that's so, so precious. That brings us total joy. And so what I want us to now reflect on is, what aspects of your life are you working on in order to become a fruitful person? And we're going to do this through a breakout session. So you're going to get a notification. It's going to be 7 minutes long. And you're just going to have a chance to share with 2 other people about how you are making effort in your life to become a fruitful person. Thank you, everybody, for coming back. I hope you guys had a good chance to share with one another. We're going to head now that we've dived into a living, thriving personal relationship with God. There's something that you build. It's a relationship, and any relationship requires growth. It requires investment. And I've heard words said to me before is that God has given everything. He's really given everything. And so really he's waiting on us to respond. This is our Hyo Jeong response. It's the first step to this journey. And on that foundation, then we come to the second principle. And the second principle is purity, integrity, and fidelity for the sake of my future marriage and family. And in other words, we call this the second blessing, to multiply. God's second blessing was to be fulfilled by Adam and Eve after they had achieved individual perfection as object partners to God, each manifesting an aspect of God's dual characteristics in order to construct the 4-position foundation in their family. Adam and Eve should have joined in loving oneness as husband and wife and raised children. This would have been the fulfillment of the second blessing. And here are Father Moon's words about marriage. Marriage is not a simple matter of a man and woman of marriageable age coming together and combining their 2 lives. Marriage is something built on the basis of sacrifice. The man must live for the sake of the woman, and the woman for the sake of the man. As you continue to live for the sake of your spouse, your selfish mind disappears completely. The heart that seeks to sacrifice this way is the heart of love. Love is not a man and woman meeting each other and having a good time. Love is offering up your life. If you marry, you must do so on the basis of your determination that your life is for your spouse. So the second blessing is amazing. This is the whole point, is that we get to experience love. And God's whole intention, if we were to look back and we look at Adam and Eve like the divine principle is talking about, Adam and Eve were intended to have an incredibly happy family. They were meant to be joyful, and you can imagine it's these 2 fruits that are filled with this sense of maturity are coming together. And these two fruits come together in this love, and they care for one another, they're appreciating, and they're not just seeing each other from their own perspectives or their own opinions, but they're coming together from a wider perspective, something that is of godly nature, from God's perspective, and they are multiplying that love. They come together and it multiplies. And in that love, they acknowledge the value in one another. And they love each other like family love each other, so they wouldn't dare forsake one another. They wouldn't dare forsake one another. And not just that, that love, it continues to generate and continues to develop. And in that love, it starts to soak its way downward. And it soaks its way into the flesh and bones of the children. And then the children, within that fertilizer of love, are then raised to become incredible citizens of the world. That was God's intention. And when I personally hear that imagery, it touches my heart because I don't see that happening. And that's what actually didn't happen. Adam and Eve separated from God. They went against his will and then found this distance between themselves and God. But imagine if they had received God's blessing to be married. Imagine if they had received God's blessing to come together. Then Cain and Abel, if you know the story of Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel that's all he knew. All he knew was he grew up in a family of where selfishness was the foundation of it. And all he knew was to kill his brother. And so we create the opposite. Our goal is to create the opposite. And we find that when a marriage is not centered on God's love, when a marriage is not centered on selflessness, not selfishness, when marriage is focused on the selfish characteristic and we didn't take time to mature ourselves, what we find ourselves in is a relationship without love, which leads to the crisis and the issues that we see in the world today. All of this starts from the individual. So although I'm talking about the second principle, I'm really just talking about the first principle. We have to go back to the basis. Everything comes back to fulfilling and taking that time to grow ourselves and our individual characters, our integrity as individuals, our integrity in our relationship. When I talk to Yuta Hori, when I talk to you, it's a relationship of integrity. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. We build this relationship. We stand on that foundation. And then we also practice purity because we honor the sanctity of our relationship with our future spouse. And that sanctity, and we bring it, we package that purity like a beautiful gift. And we bring it and we walk that into our relationship with our spouse. And it comes in the beautiful form of our fidelity, our absolute commitment. And we need this, and we have to work through ourselves. We have to work through our selfish desires and start to pray and start to connect to something deeper than ourselves on our relationship with God. And there's simply just nothing greater. I recently got married, and I'm now experiencing this. I just can't even fathom the how amazing and how much joy and happiness it really brings to you. And people can tell you about it. I can tell you about it, but you don't know it until it's there. And when you bring that purity with it, man, is it the world. So I want to introduce you guys to someone who just experienced the world as well. We have the same wedding date. She's an incredible sister. To share her testimony with us, I would like to invite up Diane Kilalu Hack. Woo!
Thank you, Joshua.
Yeah, Diane Luna.
Diane.
Hey, Diane.
Yeah, we have this. We have the same anniversary. How crazy is that? We got married on the same day. Wow, this is amazing. Look at all of you. Oh my God. Whew. So yes, I'm here to share how I kept my purity and my integrity before my marriage. And I mean, one thing that I would say, first of all, is that this Hyo Jeong promise is so beautiful, because as Joshua was speaking, I was thinking about, all my friends at school and all those people who don't really know about, keeping yourself pure, or having what we have today, right? We're all here today, but some people, they're not here. And, it's just beautiful to see you all today. So one thing I would say for me personally, in order to become a beautiful wife or a husband, the first thing you have to do is work on yourself, as Joshua said. But in order to work on yourself, you also have to work on your relationship with God, right? That's like the first thing. That's like the most important step that you have to take. Because without really working on your relationship with God, you can't really know who you truly are, right? If God is the one who created us, then we have to go back to Him to really know who we are. So I think that's one step that growing up, I really took that step to look back and say, well, you know, I'm going into this marriage, but how can I really work on my relationship with God? How can I become a person that I'm looking for, right? We think about like, I want to meet this right person. And that was my mindset. I was thinking, you know, I want to find the right person. But then I really thought the most important thing is to become that right person. You know, you can't become the person that you're looking. You cannot wait for the person that you're looking for and just sit there and say that I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to wait for them to come, or to wait for them to come and love me. So really embodying God's words and embodying God's love is one step that we have to take. And I think for me, um before my marriage, I was, you know, one thing that I did, I would always do conditions. I would always, you know, pray to God. I would always ask God, you know, how can I really become that right person? How can I really become the best spouse? How can I, you know, become the best daughter? And that comes back to the first blessing, like Joshua said, to become fruitful. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect now, but because I'm still working on it, even now, even if I'm married, I'm still working on how to become the right person or the best person that God wants me to become. But it's just, you know, once you become one with God and you embody God's love and God's words, I think that's when you actually feel that you're ready to go. You're actually ready to get into marriage. For me, the reason why I decided to get married was because I finally understood how big God's love was by reading God's words, right? And I kept myself pure. And by pure, I mean that it's not just the physical, just not having sex. It's not just that, but it's also your intentions. How pure are your intentions, your thoughts, your words, you know, how pure are they? And, you know, I would always look at my my friends as my brothers and sisters, because in this world it's really hard to keep your purity, right? But if you look at people the same way that God looks at them, I wouldn't say that it's going to be perfect, but it makes it easier, right? Looking at them the way that God sees them. And I think that's one thing. Before marriage, I would always, even though it was a struggle, thinking that, you know, my friend were like, oh, you know, how can you like, you don't have any boyfriends, or, you know, like, how can you just live like that? But I would tell them that I see them as my brothers and sisters, or like my brothers, though, you know, in this case, as a sister. I see them as my brothers. So that's how I keep my purity. That's how I see them. So my intentions, how pure are your intentions? And I think by having a pure intention, that's also how I keep my physical purity, or, you know, waiting for my spouse to come, or being married right now. And I think the second thing I would say is having integrity. Um, how I had integrity was to like be honest with myself and be honest with God's words and stay with the principles that I have. How strong am I, you know, am I following the principles that I know God gave me, like the Bible, you know, how strong am I following it? Because I think when you have strong principles, you have to stay honest with it, right? You have to really stay honest and believe that I have to, you know, follow this, and I have to, like, you know, I can't go astray. I can't be undivided from God's words or from the principles that I'm reading. So I'm not going to talk a lot, which I already did. But yeah, to wrap it up, I would just say that for all of you that are not married yet, I would say please wait and please have a relationship with God. And it's you're going to be beautiful husbands and wives, and just, you know, have that relationship with God first and embody God's words and love first. And yeah, your marriage will be better.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Woo,
God
thank
bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just speak on one point that she was talking about, purity and our pure heart. And I know many of us may be coming from different backgrounds and different places with that. And I talk about the gift, and maybe your gift is a little bit damaged or whatnot. But as far as the powerful and beautiful thing about love is that when you give it with a sincere heart, if today you start working on developing yourself and maturing yourself, what you offer to whomever that will be for your future will receive it, and they will receive it well. And that's something that you can trust in. And God has already forgiven you for it and all those things. So that's something to look forward. It's incredible. It's really, really incredible. So thank you, Diane. All right. So that's the second principle. The second principle is the purity, fidelity, and integrity in your relationship and as you prepare for your future relationships. And so the third principle is to positively impact humanity and the world around you or around me. And this comes from the biblical verse again, and it's talking about having dominion. And this is what the divine principle says. The meaning of God's third blessing is the perfection of human beings' dominion over the natural world. To fulfill this blessing, the four-position foundation of dominion must be established centered on God. Human beings and the natural world, which are the substantial object partners of God at the level of image and symbol respectively, must share love and beauty to become completely one. And so we find that actually these blessings, they go successively. They stand on top of one another upon the foundation of one another. And I know I'm beating the bush really, really hard here. It's all about the foundation of becoming fruitful first. And then we multiply and we experience God's blessing in our marriage. And then lastly, we come to a point where we become, it sounds like dominators, but it's really the caretakers of the world. Someone that uses and expresses their God-given passions and creativity and energy and all of that into caring for the creation and caring for the greater humanity. That's what we're striving for. And when all of that happens, when each and every individual and their families are doing this, then what we get is literally the kingdom of heaven on earth. That's what this all results into, the whole purpose. So we place this as our focus, but we start with being fruitful. And so in Romans 8:19-23, it describes how the creation is an eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. It's groaning in travail over the fact that the children aren't there. Who are the children? It's us. It's us. We are the generation that needs to step up so that creation can feel love. You can imagine. And so we look at the mountains, or I look at a rose, and from my perspective, a rose's purpose is to bring me joy and to show its beauty to me. But if I don't have the maturity to acknowledge that that rose was given to me from God, then that rose is sad. It's hurting because it doesn't get to fulfill its purpose. It's not appreciated. And so what we are doing is creating a generation that puts humanity in the world first. We live in a me-first mentality a lot of the time. We think, especially in the coronavirus season we're in, many people are thinking about themselves. But in a moment, we have to consider that if we are really trying to push love at the center, and if that is what brings us total joy and what brings God joy, then we need to be thinking of the bigger picture. And to think of the bigger picture starts with us recognizing that we have the value. We are capable of thinking bigger. We are incredible. And so these words are from Father Moon, from his autobiography, and they're incredible, and I want to read them to you today. Your choice of occupation should not be based on just your talents and interests. Whether you become a firefighter, a farmer, a soccer player, it's up to you. But what I am referring to transcends your occupation. What kind of life will you lead as a soccer player? How will you live as a farmer? What is your objective in life? Before unconditionally focusing entirely on studies, young people must realize what they want to do in life. They must make a determination to use their talents to help the world rather than just to serve themselves. Many young people today seem to be studying just for its own sake. Unless you have a purpose in your life, your studies will lack the passion needed for happiness. And to set your objective is to give meaning to the life you will lead. If you're going to be a farmer, then you should set your objective to test new agricultural methods, develop better species of crops, help eradicate world hunger. If you're going to be a soccer player, then set a meaningful objective, such as to heighten your country's image in the world or establish soccer camps that will nurture the dreams of economically deprived children. And this, I want to end for this part about the third principle, positively impacting the world, is believing that we were all created to be great men and women. God did not send us into this world without purpose. When God created us, he invested his complete love into each person. So we are all created for greatness. Because God exists, we can accomplish anything. And these words touch my heart because what I recognize in my life is that I'm meant for greatness, but it starts with me maturing and bearing fruit. It starts with me working on my relationships, committing to purity, fidelity, and then going out into the world, using my passions and knowing that I'm coming from a place where it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about the entirety of the world. And I am great enough to make an impact on it. So as an overview, someone's going to share the screen here. And these are the three. I am devoted to a living, thriving personal relationship with God, my heavenly parent. I'm devoted to integrity, purity, and fidelity for the sake of marriage and family, and I am devoted to positively impacting the world around me. And I'd like to invite now Kayleigh Moffett, who's the director for YAM, to share our call to action.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. Amazing education for us tonight. You know, for me, I've been married for 12 years this May, and I have 3 beautiful children, and I love my husband and I love our marriage. And what I think about all the things we've been through, the time that we spent as single people developing our character was the most precious time to be in the place that we are now. And so this promise that we're making, the habits that we're devoting ourselves to fully and completely, they're only magnified even more in our marriage. You know, your future marriage isn't going to solve your problems. Everything that you have going on in your life just translates into your future marriage. So this is truly the time to make this devotion to your relationship with God, to your integrity and your purity, and to developing a mindset that thinks of others in your interaction with the world around you. So I want to invite you now, if you're on your computer or your phone, whatever you're using, to head to the HJ Promise website. It's hjpromise.org, and I want to invite you to click the button, or you can go to hjpromise.org/sign and make the promise. You can fill this out. It just takes a few seconds. But I want to invite you to do it with your sincerity, with your heart. I know we're on our computer, so it feels a little bit different, but this moment is significant and it's transformative. It represents a starting point in your devotion and really actualizing these 3 points. So let's each take a moment on our computers and our phones to make this promise tonight. Okay, thank you everybody for taking that time. If you're still working on it, no problem. Please make sure you get a chance to sign up so you can get connected with our community and actualize that promise. And I want to offer a prayer today to signify and sanctify this important commitment that we're each making today to the Hyo Jeong promise. So if you could join me in prayer. Most beloved Heavenly Parent, thank you tonight that we could gather from all over the nation, Heavenly Parent, to talk about these principles that I know are important to you, God. And when you look at the world, you have such a strong desire to connect with each of us and be infused in our life and in our marriage and in our future families, God, and in all the relationships that we have in our life. And so I pray tonight, as so many of us have gathered here, to make this promise and make this offering and devote ourselves to our relationship with you and preparing for our future marriage and living for the sake of others, these 3 principles of the Hyo Jeong promise. I pray that you can bless each of us and empower us, surround us with the people and the things that we need in our life to actualize these points, God. Bless each of them. Let them be victorious in this offering and in this devotion and in sharing it with others in their lives. We want to offer up this night to you in the name of David and Kayleigh Moffett of Blessed Central Family. Amen and adieu.
Achoo.
Achoo.
Congratulations, everybody. Thank you so much for making the promise. And if you didn't do it yet, you can continue to do so. I want to end here with just a few further call to actions for all of you who have committed to the promise or are still thinking about it. What this opens you up to is to understand more and more about where these promises come to. So this is called the divine principle. And if you do not know the divine principle, this is where these three promises are coming from. It's where the principles are coming from. It's written by Father Moon, and with the intention of us as young people embracing these principles, we become the generation that steps up and goes above and beyond in this world. I want to see each and every one of you making impact on humanity, having beautiful, beautiful marriages. And then at the core of it all, you're happy because you are practicing Hyo Jeong. You are feeling spiritually fulfilled. And so all of this is about you experiencing joy in its fullest. So we thank you. There's going to be opportunities through, if you sign up, you'll get emails, or through your connections, whoever invited you to the Hyo Jeong promise, for you to get activated in this and sharing it. And now that you've taken the promise, you can now share it with others. And then also for further education. There's local communities around the nation that are offering further in-depth education for you so that you can grow and continue to develop as your individual self for the sake of the whole. So thank you, each and every one of you. God bless you. Have a wonderful night. And Hyo Jeong Pride. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Bless y'all.
everyone.
Hey guys.
God bless.
Thank you.
I used to live like I was under attack, dodging arrows from my past. I had no hope for tomorrow. Felt so much pressure, yes, I thought I would crack. But now there's no looking back. I'm moving forward, cause I know I got my armor now. No fear, no doubt, can't shoot me down, yeah. I got my armor now, no fear, no doubt. Gonna shoot me down, 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 down.